We really wrestled with
Oh,
it.
really?
We kept coming up with beautiful images to put on the backdrop, and then going, yeah, but by the time you've got a shot like that, it's not going to make sense of it.
It's about using the environment as a whole, I think. Just throwing in physical objects as well as the screen.
Definitely physical.
Massively
Furniture
helps.
made a big difference.
Like a lamp,
we totally
and a
nicked
table,
things
and some
from
plants.
your office.
Well, yeah, you chuck it all in.
We're going to see how it goes. Don't know how it's going to go. This is the first podcast. Matt has joined me today. Matt's from PSP. Do you want to give us a little word or two about who you are and what your job is?
So I'm head of creative services at PSP. I look after the studio, anything creative in or out.
And that's pretty much why I've asked Matt to join me today, because Matt and I just kind of clicked.
Yeah.
We have worked together for quite a few years, I think now. We just got that kind of creative chit-chat going on where, you get a bit blue sky about stuff and then you go, oh, yeah, but the client's never got any money to do those things. But isn't it nice to talk about them?
Yeah.
I thought we could talk about where we've all been over the past couple of years and designing for virtual events, and maybe some of the things that I've learned and some of the experiences that you've had and why it's so different. I think we all sort of thought as though, well, this is just like a stage that we're going to have in a studio, like we would with some cameras. And actually, when we started shooting it and started streaming it, we realised it's quite different because you've got to think of it like a TV show. You've got to look at what every shot is going to look like.
Yeah.
And certainly the event that I did in May, which was my first experience in your studios in B30.
Yeah.
It was quite a shock to the system. Like, I'd sort of anticipated some of it.
Yeah.
And I knew that so those of you who don't know B30 Studios, you've kind of got this.
Yeah, so we've got a kind of standalone live studio with a big LED screen or an empty space. It's got a couple of kind of control rooms, so we can basically do everything from the studio.
But the key factor in the space from designing for it point of view is this L-shaped
so an
environment.
L-shaped environment, kind of studio-esque, LED backdrop, so we can put whatever we want in it from session to session.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Right. Yeah. So you start off and you have your event head on, right, and you go, okay, so I've got my big screen. So I'm
going to put something across the whole
you're
screen.
imagining where you were before, with there was a stage in front of it and maybe a bit of furniture.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a lectern, maybe there wasn't.
Yeah.
There's a
graphics,
bit of furniture,
sponsors.
and the cameras are miles away behind the audience, and they are filming what is happening on stage and the massive graphics that go on. And it's a lot of wide shots, and then when there isn't a wide shot, it's just a tight, head and shoulder shot.
Head and shoulders.
And that was kind of all you had to think about. So you would design for the audience in the room, rather than the audience that are watching on the live camera relay.
Yeah.
And I think, well, I certainly did, initially thought like that. Oh, this screen, it's amazing. The graphics that we can put across it. And then as I started to get into it, I realised that, hang on a minute, a lot of these sessions are like little chat things and people are sat down. So all of this like hyped behind everybody, we weren't going to see it most of the time, because unless there was a key point where we thought, right, we want to show a graphic and we've got to make sure that on cue we cut to a wide to see it, you weren't going to see it. So I think I certainly learned a lot. And even
when we first started doing it, when we first started doing it, we were looking at it as just recreate a live event in a studio. But it's very, very different. Like you say, you'd create all of these lovely graphics, widescreen graphics behind everybody, and you'd get a camera shot and no one would see it. Like this camera shot, you can see this much stuff here. So everything you create is just kind of pointless.
See the rest of the mess in the
room. But yeah, we'd get them in, sit them down, put all the graphics up, get the camera shot, and go, you can't see their logo. You can't see this, you can't see that. So you had to rejig everything so you could see the bits that you needed to see, so you could get their logo in, you could get their content in on certain shots. So it's very, very different, and I think we had a steep learning curve with that as well.
It's definitely, I think, more like producing for TV. Yes. Not that I've ever produced anything for TV, but in my head that's how I imagine it.
Yeah, definitely.
Sets that are like I've got a live audience, their chat shows. So I'm thinking like BBC's One Show, Graham Norton's chat show. So when you look at the set wide, there's a lot of interest around the whole space for the studio audience that is there. But when you really look at how that's built, all the interest is in actually a very small area around where the camera shots are going to be.
Yeah.
And that was the key thing. Like, you know, this lovely big L-shaped LED wall.
Yeah.
You initially look at it and go, oh my goodness, the graphics we can put on there, the movement, the shapes, the interesting effects. But unless you've got a presenter who is prepared to kind of walk it and a camera to follow it and do things like that with it, you've got to think small, and you've got to start thinking camera shots.
Yeah, definitely. It's much more about that camera shot and what that camera shot looks like from take to take. So who's there, who they're speaking to, and then how you're going to move that as well. Because, you know, in a live show, you probably need 1 or 2 cameras. In real life, you need a head and shoulders for a bit of relay. Whereas in a studio, if you've got more than 2 or 3 people, you're on 3 cameras, 1 each, wide, 1 that maybe moves, 1 on a track, 1 on a boom, on a jib. So it is very different.
Yeah.
I think you've got to think about all those shots, what that person looks like in that shot, then what's behind them, and then what it looks like when they're having a conversation.
It becomes much more multi-layered, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then what it looks like when you're streaming person in on the screen. So you've got another wide shot. So you've got multiple shots to try and get right. And then it's knowing what those shots are beforehand so you can design the content appropriately.
So the other factor, I think, as well...
work backwards from the shots.
There's 2 other factors, especially when you're dealing with corporate events. Then there's they produce a PowerPoint deck and they're going to be sat or stood in front of this screen and present. So how big do you make it for the shot that you're going to shoot it at? You know what I mean, though? So again, if you think back to how we would produce stuff for a stage show, you've got your projection screen or your LED wall, a big stage, and they're probably going to move around and talk to it because somebody speaker coached them and told them to do that. And a cameraman hate them because they're doing that all the time. Like, stand still. But suddenly, when they're in this environment that isn't that big stage set, they naturally, I think, certainly I've found with my client, they wanted to create something more intimate and smaller.
Yeah.
And it caused them to want to have conversations like we're having here that just brought everything down to a small scale. They did a few like kind of little skits and things that we used more of the screen where they stood in front of it and kind of they did this kind of weatherman thing, which I thought was really fun and worked really well. But in the main, we were dealing with areas that were small.
Yeah.
But going back to what I started with, the PowerPoint factor, you know, the on-screen graphics, it didn't, even in live events, you can never get people away, never get corporate clients away from, I want to create a PowerPoint deck. Even if you've got a massive widescreen stage set, but it's still...
I've got a graph to show.
It's going to be in PowerPoint. So they're back to producing the 16:9 slides. So then you're thinking, well, where are we going to put that in this screen? Where do we need to be able to see that slide in the camera shot? Is that something that, you know, say for example, it was you and I, if we got like a frame on the back wall,
is it going to go in
or is
there?
it going to be something that's cut away? Again, thinking through all of that.
Yeah, and then it depends on kind of you go into platform, how they're going to view it their side as well. So you've got that extra step. So do you even need to show it? Is it just a head and shoulders tight shot and then you pip it into the screen that they're watching? So you've a lot of
all these different factors. So I think when we first started moving away from everything being 100% remote, where there were a lot of restrictions on that, we naturally, our heads went back to, okay, well now we're just live streaming a live event. It just happens to be in studio. No, we're producing television shows now. And so we've been on 2 steep learning curves in the space of 2.5 years, I think.
And now we're combining the 2. It's getting even more interesting.
What do you think is going to happen there? In my head, going back to the shows I just mentioned, I'm sort of thinking we're going to need to find venues that have got like raked seating in, and
I think it'll drift back to normal almost, and then a bit of I think some companies have realised where the savings are in terms of not flying in, you know, CEOs from 7 different countries. That they can stream it to them.
Even my UK based client sees the advantages of reach to do a whole company live stream in small chunks across a week, rather than just taking the senior leaders and then, you know, office level dissemination that has variations, and, you know, maybe information drops out. The advantages of being able to communicate to everyone all together,
all at once,
are huge, and they've definitely recognised and stuck with that. Yes, there are lots of things that we're going to need to go back to live for.
Yeah.
I think awards and things like that, where the in-person experience cannot be replicated.
Agree. I don't think you'll ever replace that face-to-face ever.
No, 100% agree.
But when you've got basic stuff where you're just delivering information, you're just delivering, financial reports, you're just delivering your everyday, this is how we're doing, this is what we're doing, and you need to deliver it to a lot of people in a short space of time, it's ideal.
Yeah, agreed. So colour is always a key factor for clients. Their corporate colours and the representation of those colours is important.
Yeah.
Now, these video signals are going through multiple processes. So you might start with a laptop that has a beautiful PowerPoint slide on, that has a lovely big bold colour that is their corporate colour and represents beautifully on that laptop screen.
Yeah.
It's RGB or it's a hex reference or whatever. Yeah. That's fine. On your laptop screen, it looks great.
Yeah.
By the time it's then sent through a switcher, then it's sent to the screen, then a camera sensor picks it up, then it's compressed and sent out to the internet, received at the other end, and you don't know what kind of monitor somebody's watching on. It's been through 6, 7, 8, 10 different processing parts, and it could look wildly different. Now, certain colours are less affected than others.
Yeah.
Grey was a big challenge. Grey could look purple in some places.
Greys and pinks are fun.
What sort of experiences have you had on that front?
It's almost impossible.
I think you've kind of almost got to sway the client or convince the client to avoid things like that, because their expectation of us being able to control what happens to that colour at every stage, it's just literally impossible for us.
Even in a live environment, if you've got their Pantone reference for their specific grey on a set, and then you stick a light up it's different.
It is, yeah.
And that's
grey in particular with lighting.
That's just a light. So once you've got it depends how you've created it, where you've created it, then where it's going, then what it's going through, and then what it's being viewed on. You kind of got no real control. You can kind of start with your basic. Obviously, you can get super technical and go into like sRGB or Adobe RGB, and what can see and what So sRGB is kind of the standard RGB that most devices can see. And then you've got Adobe RGB, which it's got more colours, but then not as many devices can see those extra colours.
Right. I always wondered what that was.
There you go.
And I deal in Adobe things all the time, and I don't know that.
And then there's, you can go into 8-bit, 10-bit, 12-bit cut.
And then there's all the different camera variations, and then the LUTs that they apply, and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm using language here I don't really understand, and my other half, who's a camera operator, is going to look at this and roll his eyes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But there's so many different variations. A colour gamut is not just a colour gamut. It can change shape and encompass different parts all the time.
And you've got no real control. All you can do is start as best you can start. Start with what it should be, and then I think most clients are reasonable enough to understand that it's going to look different on an iPhone and it's going to look different on your PC screen and it's going to look different on someone's OLED TV.
The best place to start with something like that is skin tones. You get people in front of a camera in the set with whatever lighting is. I mean, in here we've got purple lighting, and you and I both are a little bit prone to pink in the face. So, that's where you start. You start with your skin tones, and then if they look right, as long as people don't look too grey, too red, too yellow, then everything else, really, the eye should adjust to that, right? So
agreed.
No matter what, you're
going to notice it more.
We've all got like mobile phone devices that do this thing in the evening where they turn slightly orangey, right?
Yeah, like night mode.
Exactly, So, but you kind of don't notice it happening. It's not like a switch. It gradually does it, and then your eye's adjusted, and you're looking at white, and it's not white anymore, but your eye is seeing it as white because your brain is adjusted for that. And I think that is something that we probably need to work with clients on to understand. Like, you give yourself a point of reference. If those skin tones look natural, then the eye will adjust around that, especially if it's colours that they are all familiar with. It's an internal event, so the greys and the blues, in relation to that person's skin tones, look right.
I think that you've got to get the skin tone right. You're going to notice it more if the skin tone of your host or whoever's talking is odd all the way through, as opposed to a grey that's not quite there company grey or not quite their, their Pantone pink.
Yeah.
I think to the handful of people in your company that might notice that the grey's wrong, compared to the 1,000 people that might watch it who think, it's a bit off colour, this looks weird.
We can control the signal up to a point once it leaves us, but then after that, I don't know how your screen is set up. I mean, you must know this. You must know this as somebody who goes out on site all the time. How often do you go into like a hotel room and the TV is set up terribly, right? Regardless of colour, or it's got that weird thing that makes everything look like ultra sharp. I don't even know what that setting is. Like, Tim's the one who always adjusts things. Place, but it's the same thing. Like, you don't know what screen they're watching things on to be able to control that. So we have to try and work with the client a little bit to understand the level of complexities and the amount of control that we have over things, and reach a sensible balance in terms of what we can change.
If you can show that what you're doing is correct and the colours you're doing are correct, from there kind of outwards, that's where you lose control over it. And as long as it's kind of, I mean, you can have that conversation. They understand that it's right here, but then when it goes onto, a bright LED screen and then back through a camera and then back out through a compressor and then back out to someone else's screen, you got no control over that process. You can tweak here and there, but there's not a lot you can do.
The other factor with colour that I found is, so I was dealing with great designers at the client's end, no disrespect to the designers at all, they were great designers, but they're all working on lovely Macs. Like, I've got lovely
nice
new
super
Apple
bright screens,
and they like to use a lot of kind of soft tints of their main colours, but the representation of those tints by the time it had been through those compressed processes were just lost. There were certain instances in an event I did with them in November where you couldn't see the white against the tint at all. Like, it just looked like a plain image by the time it had sort of gone through a compression for the internet.
You've got another thing there, is they're designing for print.
No, these guys were designing for screen as well. So specifically a motion designer and specifically a PowerPoint designer. So they were very much used to designing for screen, but they're used to designing for screens, their own screen, they're lovely. They can show all the subtleties of colour, So no, there is that though. Definitely,
there's definitely that.
There is definitely the print designer factor as well.
You get sent a set of brand guidelines, and it'll be 10%, 20%, 40%. You're like, you're not going to see that. You're not going to see that. You're not going to see that. It's just not going to happen. So
exactly,
there is that to think of as well.
So in terms of the set look itself, bearing in mind all the things that we talked about, the camera shots and things, how much do you think we'll be able to convince clients to do a bit more? Because I was gutted that we didn't get to use more of that set. I like to think that I worked with the designers to create some lovely looking setups.
Yeah, no, it did.
We had a nice podcast thing that was clearly a lot larger than this, but
which we've recently
it was all
kind of duplicated.
It was all kind of moody and dark, and
I think that's kind of the way to go. I think if you can get that dark,
I think for me that set was more about the texture and creating a whole room environment. So it wasn't dependent on what was on that wall.
Just on the wall.
I treated it more like a wall than a screen, because as soon as you think of it as a screen, you start going, oh, well, I want a keyword up here, and I want you know what I mean? You want to feel the design altogether. So I tried to move away from that, and we were still making adjustments to that until only a few days before the event. We really wrestled with it. We kept coming up with beautiful images to put on the backdrop, and then going, but by the time you've got a shot like that, it's just not going to make sense of it. So
it's about using the environment as a whole, I think. Just throwing in physical objects as well as the screen.
Definitely physical.
Massively
Furniture
helps.
made a big difference.
Like a lamp,
we totally
and a
nicked
table,
things
and some
from
plants.
your office.
Well, that's you chuck it all in. It gives you that.
Softens it as well, I think.
Definitely.
Putting a few of those props in, like a few plants.
And if you're trying to create that homely kind of feel, or that studio feel, you look at a TV studio, like one show, they've got a table, and they've all got drinks, and there's a plant, and there's a lamp, and there's a bookshelf, and there's exactly. But it softens that. I'm here. There's a screen there.
Yeah,
that's it.
Which again, going full circle, compared to designing for a stage set conference is different. Like
Very different.
About the extent of the furniture that you typically have on stage set would be, you know, a panel session view.
Yeah, some stalls.
Exactly, and that would be it.
Water table.
Trying to put a plant on there and that sort of thing is just invisible because it's so small in the scale of things.
Yeah.
So we have to think, weirdly, we have to think smaller.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of probably the key takeaway, isn't
Definitely,
it?
you're almost kind of interior designy kind of feel. It is, like you say, it's thinking of it as a wall, as an environment rather than a screen. But you can tweak, you can tweak that. Like if there was a photo frame on the wall, you can put something that's moving in it. If there's a picture there, that can have live graphics in it. You know, you're on air sign, that could be doing stuff.
Yeah.
So it's got that advantage that you can mess with it a little bit.
Exactly, but it needs to be treated more like a texture, I think.
Exactly.
More like some added interest.
Yeah.
Screensaver, like, almost.
Yeah.
I'm just noticing out of the corner of my eye here, my
it's like,
screen's gone to kind of screensaver effect.
Yeah.
So as long as it doesn't then become distracting behind somebody's head in the shot, then it's just something that's added interest when you do open up to a wider shot.
Yeah.
I think, I'm going to be interested to do another one.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing another one. Somebody give me another
cool.
job to do another one.
No, it is cool. It is cool. And when you get some nice branding or some nice assets to work with, it just makes it, like we did one for it was a housing association, and they had 3 specific sections they wanted to talk about, and each had its own little kind of iconic graphics, and we built it in so they were slowly moving across the screen in the back and slowly building back. So it's just not a static background.
Yeah.
And then when you pull to it, you go, oh, that's the brand. Yeah. Oh, that's quite cool.
Yeah.
It's just there's so many. Live's different to virtual. That's different to studio. That's different to. It is. And then it depends what you're doing again as well. Whether it's chat or conference or delivery.
Do you think the camera shots all need to be rehearsed a lot as well, like that?
Yeah.
That had occurred to me a little bit before being on site. Like I knew, we'd need certain shots, but I hadn't really thought about how much we would need to rehearse that in direct relation to the speakers.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one shot towards the end of the conference where the CEO turned to a close-up camera, and there were some plants in between. There was like a slow creep in like that.
Nice.
And we had to rehearse that because he had to turn from the main camera to the close-up camera for that to work. And for me, things like that gave it another little edge, and it wasn't just a vision director choosing which shot to go through one to another.
Another added dimension.
Yeah.